maybe they compensate your session.
Yeah, they would. Don't worry, don't worry. That is on
Yes.
us. We'll compensate
Yes.
the session if you couldn't complete your session with everything. So we'll give you a session. Don't worry about that.
Yes.
So yes, as we are meeting for the first time, Tavish, would you mind giving me a short introduction of yours so that I can know you better?
Uh, oh, of course, I would love to introduce myself. Uh, my name is Tavish. I'm from Uttar Pradesh. I'm a student of Master of Science uh, in botany subject. And uh, if I talk about my hobbies, so I love to play cricket.
Okay, great. You're pursuing masters that too in botany. I want to know from you why botany. It's so boring. I was a science student too.
I'm going to attempt to learn C++ programming in only 1 week. Will I succeed?
In this course, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know to get started programming in Python. Now, in this tutorial, I want to talk to you about writing a basic Python program. So we're going to write just a very simple Python program. We're going to look at how we can go ahead and write our programs. We're going to talk about how our programs are getting executed by Python. And we're also going to draw out a little shape onto the screen. So this is going to be pretty cool. I'm excited to talk to you guys about just the bare basics of Python and really just sort of give you an introduction. So over here, we have our basic text editor. And so any of the Python code that I write inside of this file is actually going to get executed by Python. So a bunch of Python code inside of it. And basically what we're doing when we're programming in Python is we're just giving the computer a set of instructions, right? That's really what programming is. It's just like we're specifying a set of instructions and the computer is going to go off and execute those instructions that we give it. And so the more complex the instructions we give to the computer, the more complex the tasks the computer can carry out. So I want to show you guys how we can use some Python instructions or some Python code in order to draw out a shape onto the screen. So I'm actually going to draw out a little triangle. So over here, we can actually print something out onto the screen in Python using something called a print statement. So I can just type out print, and inside of these parentheses, I can just type some quotation marks, and inside the quotation marks, we can put whatever we want to print out onto the screen. So I'm gonna copy this, and I'm actually gonna make a few of these little print statements. And we're gonna actually draw a shape. So we're gonna draw like a triangle type shape. So down here, I'm just gonna draw a forward slash, and then up here, I'll make a space, and we'll do another forward slash. Here we'll make 2 spaces, we'll do another forward slash, and over here, we're gonna make 3 spaces and a forward slash. And now I'm gonna draw like vertical bars going all the way down. And actually, we can do some underscores here as well. That'd be kind of cool. All right, so now we have our triangle looking shape, and you can see it looks kind of like a right triangle. So I can save my file, and I can either come up here to run and click run app, or if you're using PyCharm, you can also just come over here and click this play button. And when I click the play button, I want you to notice what happens down here. So down here we have this little window, and this is called the console. And basically the console is just a place where Python is going to output some information. So when we use this print statement, we're basically telling Python like, hey, can you print something out onto the console? So there's a lot of situations where we're going to want to see what's going on in our code. And we can use that print statement and print things out to the console, and we can basically like have a little window into what our program's doing. In our case, we're just going to be printing out this triangle onto the console. So I'm going to come over here and click this play button, and you'll see down here we're actually printing out that triangle. So mission accomplished, we were able to print out our shape. So I could really draw any shape I wanted as long as I was able to specify it inside of these print statements. And so essentially what Python's doing when I click that play button is it's going into this file and it's looking at all of these instructions in order. So the first thing it does is it goes to this instruction and it says, okay, they want me to draw out these like little forward slash and this vertical bar onto the screen. Once it does that, it goes down to this instruction. It says, okay, they want me to print something out again. When it prints that out, it goes down to this instruction, etc. So Python is actually going to execute the lines of code that we write in order. So the order in which I write the instructions matters a lot. So for example, if I was to take this last line here and put it up here at the top, now when I save the file, instead of just drawing out that triangle, it's going to draw out this little upside down bottom thing at the top and then the rest of the triangle down here. So the order of the instructions actually matters a lot. And so how your Python programs are going to go. As we go through this course, we're going to learn more and more of these little lines. So here we're just using this little print function. Basically, it just prints something out onto the screen. There's a bunch of little things like this that we can learn. And as we go through, we'll learn more and more instructions that we can give to the computer. But in this lesson, I just want to kind of show you guys the basics, right? We can essentially just define these little instructions for the computer, and the computer will execute them in order. In this tutorial, I want to talk to you guys about using variables in Python. Now in Python, you're going to be dealing with a lot of data. And so a lot of times in our program, we're going to be working with all types of information and data and values. And sometimes that data can be difficult to manage. So in Python, we have this thing called a variable, and it's basically just a container where we can store certain data values. And when we use a variable, when we put those data values inside containers, it makes it a lot easier for us to work with and manage all of the different data inside of our programs. So variables are extremely helpful, and it's sort of like a core topic in Python that you're really going to want to know and master. So in this tutorial, I'm going to teach you guys everything you need to know to get started with variables. We're going to look at what they are, why they're useful, and we'll look at the different types of variables and the different types of data that we can store inside of variables. So over here in my Python file, I just have a very simple program, and it's basically just printing some text out onto the screen. And so this is actually a little story that I wrote. It says, there once was a man named George. He was 70 years old. He really liked the name George, but didn't like being 70. So this is a valid Python program. I could go ahead and run this program, and you'll see down here in the console, everything prints out and it looks great. So we have an awesome little Python program here. But let's say that inside of our story, I wanted to change the character's name. So instead of naming the character George, let's say I wanted to name the character John. Well, I'm going to have to go through and I'm going to have to manually change the name George to the name John at every place inside of this story where it's mentioned. So I'm going to have to go over here and I'll say, okay, John, I'm going to have to manually change that. And then, okay, down here, we're going to have to, again, manually type in John and change it to John. So in order to change the character's name, I had to manually go in and change it in both places. And now let's say, okay, maybe we want to change the character's age also. So in addition to changing the name, we also want to change the age. Let's make him a little bit younger. So why don't we say John is going to be 35. And so you'll see here I had to come here and manually change the age and then come down here and manually change it again, right? And now that we changed it, like it's going to work, it's going to be updated in our program. But you'll notice that in order to make that change, like I had to look through the entire program, find where that value was, and change it. And this was only with 4 lines of the story. Imagine if I had a story that was like thousands of lines long, and we mentioned the character's name and age like hundreds of times. I mean, I'd have to look through each one of those lines and manually change the character's name. And that is not a very good way for us to do this. And it's really not a good way for us to manage the data in our program, right? The character's name and the age. And so we can actually use a variable in order to store the character's name and the character's age. And when we use that variable, it'll make it a lot easier for us to put the character's name and age inside of our little program here. So I'm going to show you guys how we can create a variable for the character's name and age. And I'm just going to go up here above this print statement. And up here, I want to create a variable. So when we create a variable in Python, we actually need to give Python a couple pieces of information. The first piece of information we need to give Python is the name of the variable. So I need to actually assign a name to this container where we're going to be storing information. And so all I have to do is just type out the name of the variable that I want to create. So I'm going to create a variable called character name. So I'm just going to say character, and I'm going to say underscore name. And so generally when you're creating a name for a variable in Python, you want to separate different words with an underscore. So I have 2 words here and I'm separating them with an underscore. And now what I need to do is I need to put a value inside of this variable. So basically what I can do is I can just say equals, and over here I can type a value. So I'm just going to type out the character's name inside of quotation marks. So we're just going to type out John. So now we have a variable for the character's name. And below this character name variable, I want to create another variable called character age. So I'm just going to type out character underscore age, and I'm going to set this equal to the character's age, which is 35. So we now have 2 variables, one representing the character's name and one representing the character's age. So what I can do now is I can replace the character's name inside of the story with this variable. And I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So if we want to put a variable inside of this print statement, I'm actually going to have to do
I couldn't wrap my head around botany.
Yes, man. Yeah,
How
but
do you understand
actually,
botany? What's interesting?
when I was when I was pursuing my graduation, so I can do my master both subject like zoology or botany. But I yeah I'm interested more in botany, so that's why I took botany.
Okay, you took botany. Well, I believe first mistake I did in my life of was choosing medical as a field. Second mistake I did was
Yes,
choosing biotechnology as a graduation degree. So after
yes,
that, thank God
yes.
I changed my career path. But I want to know from you, did you ever regret that why I chose this field? Because success rate is really low in this field.
Actually, ma'am, I first pursued BSc. After that, I uh, uh, I have pursued B.Ed and M.Ed. So
Oh
right
my
now I'm
God.
pursuing MSc. So
Wow.
yeah, I also changed my path.
Good job. So you would like to be a professor in future?
do a couple things. The first
Yes, ma'am. Actually,
Great.
I I attempted UGC NET in 2023 June. So, but
Okay. How was
unfortunately, I
it?
couldn't qualify.
Oh,
I couldn't
okay.
qualify. Yeah,
So you're
it
preparing
was
now as
just
well? You would be preparing
three.
again?
Yes, of course. I would prepare,
Hmm. I
but
don't know why,
actually,
but the curriculum is
just
really typical.
yes, yes. It is a very broad curriculum actually.
Yes.
So
So, ever you thought of giving other examination?
Not now. Actually, I just want to become assistant professor. So that's why I clear my goal towards. So I just want to clear UGC net, and after that uh, I would love to.
Okay. I wish you all the best. How's your preparation going?
Thank you. Yeah, actually, right now I'm not preparing because right now I just want to improve my communication skills. Like
Why you
I
want to
was
work
not
on your communication?
actually. I think that being a teacher, I should have uh, communication skill, uh, good communication skills.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Okay. Absolutely,
we
you
talk in
must.
Hindi, but yeah, we
I
talk in
remember I
Hindi,
had a
but I
botany
cannot
teacher
talk in English. Yes,
who would say stomata so many
yes,
times.
tomato. Yes, it's
Yeah, who
tomato.
would say fungi. I'm like, oh please. So it's
Yes,
important
yes,
for a teacher, otherwise people laugh at you, especially kids. So it's
yes,
good you're
yes,
working on
yes.
your communication. Very good.
Yeah,
So should I introduce myself too, or shall we just
yes,
proceed
of
ahead?
course, ma'am. No, ma'am. Yeah,
Okay.
I want to. Yeah,
Well, I've already given you a glimpse of my career path. Let me still rephrase it better.
yes, ma'am.
So, as you can see on screen, I'm
Okay.
Shruti Sharma. I'm talking to you from Haryana. Yes, I've done my graduation in biotechnology, a biggest regret. But after that, currently I'm pursuing my master's.
Single like quoted line. And now I also have this text over here at the end, so I'm going to have to put a quotation mark here. So now I have a bunch of text here in quotation marks, and then I also have text over here in quotation marks. Now inside of here, instead of saying the character's name, I want to refer to that character name variable. So I'm just going to say plus character underscore name, and I want to say another plus sign. So I basically am saying I want to print out all of this text plus the value that's stored inside of character name plus all of this text. And what this will do is it'll actually print out the character's name when we print this. So I'm going to go ahead and run this program, and you'll see down here, and actually let me put a space over here and we'll run it again. So you can see down here we still are printing out there once was a man named John. And so what Python is doing is when it executes this line of code, it's coming over here and it's seeing, oh, okay, they want to print out the value inside of character name. So Python's going to go up here, it's going to get the value, and it's going to insert it inside of there. So I can basically do this for every instance of the character name in my file. So I can, I'll just copy this guy right here, and I can just paste it down here where the character's name is. So I'll paste this, and you can see now we're doing exactly the same thing that we did up there. I can also do this for the character's age. So I'm going to come down here and I'll paste in what we just pasted in. And I'm going to change this. Instead of character name, we'll change it to character age. And I'm going to do this in one more spot. So we're going to do this over here where we're mentioning the age. And again, I'll just change this to character age. And so now when I run this program, it's going to print out the same story that we were printing out before, but now I don't actually have to type in the character's name and the character's age. I can just refer to this variable. And the cool thing about variables is if I wanted to change the character's name, now all I have to do is change it up here. So I could change the character's name to like Tom or something, and we could also change their age. So I could change the age to be like 50. And now that's going to automatically update throughout our entire story. So when I click this play button, you'll see now we're using the name Tom, and he's 50 years old. So that's where variables can come in handy, and this can be a really awesome way to control and manage the data that's inside of our programs. With variables, you can also modify their values. So, for example, let's say that halfway through the story, I wanted to change the character's name. Well, I can just make some new lines over here, and down here, I can actually assign a new value to one of these variables. So I could say like character underscore name, and in order to give it a different value, all I have to do is just say equals, and we'll give it a different value. So let's say halfway through the story, we want to change the character's name to Mike. Well, now when I run on my program, you'll see here in the first part of the story, it says there once was a man named Tom. And in the second part of the story, it's referring to the name as Mike. So I actually updated the variable inside of my program over here. And that's a really awesome way. A lot of times in these programs, you're gonna wanna be modifying the values of variables. And so you can do it just like that. And so finally, I wanna talk to you guys about the different types of data that we can store inside of these variables. So over here, I have the character name and the character age. And I'm actually storing what are called strings. So a string is basically just plain text, right? So the name Tom, that's just plain text. Down here, these guys are strings as well. So there's a data type in Python called a string, and it's just basically going to store plain text. So, any text that you would have like in a story or, someone's name, you can store inside of a string. There's also another type of data that we can store inside of Python, which is numbers. So in addition to storing text, we can also store numbers. So if I wanted to store a number, for example, let's say we wanted to store the character age instead of inside of a string, we could store it inside of a number. So I could just type out 50. And when we're storing a number, we don't need these quotation marks. You only need that quotation mark when you're storing a string. So if I wanted to store a number, I can just write it out like this. And in addition to using whole numbers, I could also use decimal numbers. So I could say like 50.5678213. And Python's gonna be able to store that number as well. So you can store all different types of numbers. And we can also store what's called a Boolean value. And a Boolean value is essentially a true or a false value. And there's a lot of instances in programming where we're gonna wanna represent true or false data. For example, I could have a variable called like is male. And this would tell me whether or not someone was a male. And in my case, it would be true because I'm a guy, right? So I can, actually this needs to be capital. So I could store a value of either true or false. And actually, if we were naming this in Python, we'd want to use an underscore. So I would say is underscore male, and this can be either true or false. So true or false values is maybe not something that you're used to dealing with like in the real world, but in programming, we're gonna be using true or false values all the time. They're super important. So like I said, there's three basic types of data that we can work with in Python. There's strings, which is just like plain text, numbers, which would be like either decimal numbers or whole numbers like this, and there's true or false values. And these are the basic types of data. I mean, there's a bunch of other types of data that we can use, but I would say 99% of the time as a new user and a new programmer to Python, you're just gonna be dealing with these three types of data. So those are the basics of the data and also with variables, and you're gonna be using variables all the time in Python, so you definitely wanna practice up and get comfortable using them. In this tutorial, I wanna talk to you guys about working with strings in Python. Now, one of the most common types of data that we're gonna be working with in Python is gonna be strings. And strings are basically just plain text. So any text that we want to have inside of our program, we can store inside of a string. So I want to talk to you guys about all the cool things we can do with strings, and we're basically just going to get a full introduction into why strings are awesome. So over here, I'm just going to actually print out a string. So I'm just going to say print, and inside of these parentheses, I can type out a string. In order to create a string, I need to use quotation marks. So I can make an open and close quotation marks just like that. Now inside of the quotation mark, I can put whatever text I want the string to have. So we could say like Draft Academy. And so now we have a string with the text Draft Academy inside of it. So if I run my program, now down here we're gonna print out Draft Academy, as you can see. And when we have these strings, there's actually a bunch of cool things that we can do with them. So one thing I could do would be to create a new line inside of the string. So if I wanted, I could come over here and I could say \n, and you can see it got highlighted in a different color. And what this is gonna do is it's actually gonna insert a new line into this string. So now it's gonna say Giraffe on one line and Academy on another line. So I'm gonna click play, and you'll see down here we just get Giraffe Academy. In addition to the \n, I could also use a / quotation mark. So if I wanted to put a quotation mark in inside of my string, I can't just put a quotation mark like that, because Python's gonna think that I'm trying to end this string. So if I want to include a quotation mark, I can just use this special / character, and that's called the escape character, and it basically just tells Python that whatever character comes after it, we want to render literally. So when I say / quotation mark, it basically means like, hey Python, I want to print out a quotation mark. And so now we'll be able to print out a quotation mark right there. I can also use this to print out a \. So if I needed to print out a \, I could say \, and it'll just print out a normal \ now. So you can see just like that. So if you want, you can use that \ to make new lines or print out quotation marks, or you can just use it as a normal \. In addition to just typing out a string here, I could also create a string variable. So I could come down up here and we can create a variable, and we'll just call it phrase, and I'm gonna set it equal to Giraffe Academy. So I can store this string value inside of a variable called phrase, and then when I wanna print out that variable, or I wanna access that string variable, I can just type the name of the variable, and you'll see that it's gonna print out the value that was stored inside of it. I can also use something called concatenation. And concatenation is basically the process of taking a string and appending another string onto it. So I could come over here and I could say phrase, and I could say plus, and now I can add in another string. So I could say like, is cool. And now this is gonna say Giraffe Academy is cool. So I'm basically appending another string onto another one. They call that concatenation. And so in addition to doing all that stuff, we can also use special things called functions. And a function is basically just a little block of code that we can run, and it'll perform a specific operation for us. And so we can use functions to modify our strings, and we can also use functions to get information about our strings. So I'm gonna show you guys a couple common functions we can use with these strings, and they're actually gonna do awesome stuff. So in order to access one of these functions, I can just say phrase, and then I can say dot. And I'm gonna show you guys a function that we can use to convert this string entirely into lowercase. So I could just say